world that Dylan had been drawn to since his childhood.
You have to remember, his uncle owned every one of the 4 cinemas in Hibbing. He owned the entire chain. That presumably meant that Dylan got to see every film he wanted to see for free when he was growing up. And they'd be showing double bills, 4 different cinemas every week. Dylan was probably soaking up an enormous amount of movie lore in the great period of American filmmaking, or slightly after the great period, but, you know, seeing those films. So I'm sure that that's always been one of the great interests for Dylan. And, of course, some of his songwriting is very cinematic. So Pat Garrett is a logical extension from that.
Dylan was introduced to the film by friend Kris Kristofferson and originally intended to contribute 2 songs for the soundtrack. Yet his interest in the project quickly grew.
Kris Kristofferson was playing the lead in the picture, and he was, Kristofferson was friends with Dylan, and they had conversations about the fact that he was starring in this film, and Dylan expressed interest in the film and being in it out of kind of nowhere. And when he expressed that, then Gordon Carroll, who was the producer of the film, got very excited. And then Dylan said, well, I'd like to see something by Peckinpah first. And he watched The Wild Bunch. And he was apparently blown away by The Wild Bunch, loved it, said, yes, I want to be in the movie. So then Gordon Carroll went back to Sam and was very excited. Oh, my God, Bob Dylan wants to be in the movie. This is tremendous. And Sam was a little leery because it wasn't his idea. He knew who Dylan was. I'm sure heard some of his music, but wasn't that super familiar with him. But more than anything, he was suspicious of a musician coming in from the outside that the producer was excited about and what really hadn't been his idea. But he was open to it, and so they agreed they would work him into the film in the small part of Alias.
In late 1972, Dylan and his family moved down to Durango for the shoot. Although the singer's scenes were restricted due to his lack of experience, from the moment he heard Dylan's compositions, Peckinpah knew that musically he had the right man on board.
Movies are, as everyone has said, a collaborative art form, and Peckinpah is very much, I think, a genuine auteur director. But even that said, it's a confluence of talents coming together, because Rudy Wurlitzer's script was very much anti the romantic mythic vision of the West. It was these sparse, stark vignettes with unwashed characters, unpoetic dialogue that made you feel like you were really meeting the kind of people that populated the West. And then Sam brought a kind of romantic lyricism to that, so because it's really a tragic romantic vision, the whole movie, but it's got a patina of reality that makes you believe the world that it's in. And then Dylan, you know, is like another tributary coming in there, and with the music, adding yet another layer to the piece that was absolutely right.
In 1973, after an unsuccessful session with members of Kristofferson's band, Dylan went to record at Burbank Studios. He recruited old colleague Bruce Langhorne to play guitar.
I got a call and someone said, can you come into the studio? Bob is doing he's doing a film score, yeah. And I said, I was doing film scores at that time. I said, well, he should do it with me, yeah? And they said, no, we just want you to play guitar.
Having famously recorded with Dylan on Bringing It All Back Home, Langhorne had not seen or worked with him for years and observed subtle changes in the singer's character and working methods.
Well, I noticed that he was a little more reserved, but that's understandable, you know, because by then he was like a world icon, you know. And when I knew him, he was just kind of Bob Dylan, you know, the guy who, you know, he's another folk singer, and he was not yet, you know, enshrined Bob Dylan. I found that on Pat Garrett, there were more musicians. It was in a larger venue because it was in a projection, you know, type studio. And I found that, or I felt that he was not as intimate with the band as he had been on some of those earlier Columbia sessions.
Nevertheless, Langhorne was once again captivated by Dylan's abilities as a band leader.
The unique thing about working with Dylan is that Dylan generates a very, very strong thread in his music, and it's the sort of thread that, you know, people can latch on to, and, you know, particularly, you know, musicians, you know, good studio musicians can latch on to and, you know, sort of get into his head and, you know, sort of generate, you know, music that's appropriate under his leadership. And I think he has a very, very strong telepathic projection or whatever that lets musicians who are empaths generally receive that communication and generate music with him based on that connection. He's a wonderful person to play in the studio with because he always has a really clear idea of what the music is going to be, what his song is going to be. And then he pretty much, you know, he puts the people around him and he lets them just, you know, do it however. And I think that's the best way to work artistically. You know, the best directors that I know direct like that also.
William H. Bonney. He killed 21 men.
I don't want to kill you, Bill.
No, I sure hope you don't, Billy.
And he was just a kid. Billy the Kid.
You take this. My luck's running good.
Patrick F. Garrett. He was the most dangerous outlaw in the territory. So they made him sheriff.
It's pretty fair shooting for an old married man. Just lucky, I guess.
Pat Garrett had just one friend,
Hey, Billy.
Billy the Kid, and just one job: kill him. Now Sam Peckinpah, the director who unleashed the Wild Bunch, takes a hard new look at two old friends, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. They were legends in their own time.
Times have changed. Times, maybe. Not me.
In May 1973, the film was released. Yet during its post-production, serious conflicts had compromised Peckinpah's original vision, and the finished work was justifiably considered a disaster.
It was one of the worst butcher jobs done on Sam's films, and it was done in a very ugly way by James Aubrey, who was the head of MGM. Sam got in a terrible pissing match with him, and Aubrey unfortunately held all the cards and took the movie away, and there was negotiations with Sam's editors, and a lot of them then eventually helped Aubrey because they wanted to try to save as much of the film as they could, and Sam had terrible, ugly fights with his editors over that. And the resulting film was you know, it's like a shattered, it's like a beautiful vase that was shattered, and you're kind of looking at the fragments trying to figure out how the vase fit together. Jay Cox of Time was the only probably major American reviewer he said even in its maimed state it was obviously a great movie, but for the most part they knew that Sam had done a good job of letting everybody know it had been taken away from him, but a lot of reviewers, it was so hard to see that this could have been a great movie. I remember when I saw it, I read the material about how it had been recut, but I just thought, I don't see a great movie here. And that's the way most reviewers felt.
James Coburn.
Bill!